Okay, hello and good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session on effective assessment. So I can see people typing hello, and you're making me feel very welcome. Good morning, Oliver. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me and see me? Please type a Y for yes. Let me just monitor the chat window. Looks as though people can see and hear me, which is great. That's a good start to an online session. So my name is Oliver. Everyone calls me Ollie, and I'll be working with you today on looking at effective assessment for teachers and students. Now, before we get into the workshop itself, I'd just like to underline and say again what Sophia mentioned, which is if we have technical issues or if you have to leave the room, this session is being recorded. It will be recorded, and about a week after the session, you will receive a follow-up email with a link to a PDF of my slides, and that will contain links and other connections for you to investigate the material, and you will get, as I say, a link to a video as well. Now, if we do encounter any technical difficulties, if my connection drops, don't worry, please stay in the session and I will come back in as soon as I can. If I do get kicked out, then take a moment to reflect on what you've seen so far and make a good use of your time. If you've taught online, you know that the internet can be changeable. Fingers crossed for a strong connection today. So today I'm going to be talking about the Ting An Friends Plus series, and it's a pleasure to welcome our partners here at Feng Nam Education for this session. Just to let you know that I won't be monitoring the main chat because it's too fast, and I will focus mainly on delivering my content. So as Sophia said, if you've just joined us, please make sure you put questions for our team into the Q&A tab, where our partners and colleagues and OUP staff will try and answer your questions as best they can. So here is my topic today, effective assessment for teachers and students. I am a Senior Educational Services Manager for Oxford University Press. I've teaching experience with all levels of learners and most ages, and I've been working at Oxford for over 20 years. And today I want to use my experience and my research recently into assessment to share some ideas about effective assessment with you using Ting An 6. To do that, I'm organizing my session today into 4 different sections. In the first section, the introduction, I'll remind you about the content of my session today. I'll do a couple of quick polls with you. So just to let you know, I will break up today's session with a number of polls for you to do, and that will share some important information with me. In the second section, assessment in Ting An 6 Friends Plus, this is where we will look at how Ting An 6 supports you with ready-to-use assessment materials like tests and quizzes. So this section, the second section, will be really important. I want to show you where to get your tests and quizzes, how to download them, and to explain what tests are ready for you so that when you start using the course, you know what there is, and that will make your preparation easy. So the second section, lots of information about the kinds of ready-made tests that will save you time. In the third section, effective assessment, we'll think about assessment, what we need to do to make assessment effective, and different kinds of assessment. I'll also share some techniques which you can use quickly and simply in your classroom to get a general sense of your students' level. And then finally, in summary and questions, I'll summarize everything we do in the next 80 minutes, and we'll try and leave about 10 minutes for me to answer any questions that the team has put forward to me. So let's look first of all at this introduction section. And I should say that our topic is assessment. It's not everybody's favorite thing. Not all students like tests and quizzes. I remember when I was a young man, a very young man, when the envelope would come through my door at home and I knew it had my school report with my grades, I would run down, grab the envelope and hide it in my bedroom so that my mum couldn't see it. However, as a teacher, we know that good assessment is really important for not only understanding what our students know or don't know, but guiding them as well. And I'm going to talk about that today. So for today's session, we're going to use the Ting An series. And it's on your screen now. It's a big series covering both primary and secondary, but we're going to specifically use the Ting An 6 Friends Plus material. In this series of webinars, we've looked at different lessons from this material, but today I'm not going to go right into a unit in detail. I'm going to talk about the assessment we can do throughout the course and the support that we provide for you. So let's now look at how I'm going to do that. On the screen, you can see my abstract for today. Now you can read faster than I can say this, so please read this, and when you've finished reading the abstract, please type F into your chat window. Please type F into your chat window. Now if you see me looking down, I'm just checking my notes, checking communications with my team, so don't be offended. Okay, I can see some teachers saying, nice to meet you. It's great to be with you. Thank you again for your time today. It means a lot to us that you're spending your time with us today. Okay, I'm just going to take a sip of water. Okay, so many of you have finished looking through that. Now, I'm going to focus very much on these sections today. What I want you to do today is I want you to, first of all, know what assessment support the coursebook provides for you and where to get it. And so this will save you time later when you teach the course. Teachers are very, very busy. We all know that. Most of us at Oxford University Press, or many of us, have been teachers before, so we understand the realities of time pressure. So I want to save you time by showing you what tests are available to support you. And then, where it says alternative assessment methods, we're going to think about how we assess students, different assessment methods, and whether the balance of assessment that we do in our classes is a good one. Now, to kick us off, I'm going to start with something quite casual and just for a bit of fun. So I've got a poll for you. So my first poll asks you a very serious question. So Sophia is going to put the poll on the screen, and I'd like you to answer as best you can. So here's your serious question. It should appear on your screen now. Okay, and I want you to answer this very serious question about eating buffet, Can you do that for me, please? Okay. Try and answer the poll on your screen, not in the chat, and then we can gather all of the responses together. Okay, so I can see from the polls tab that many teachers are responding. I've got about 700 responses so far. Okay, I want to get a lot more before I close the poll for this very serious question. Okay, let's see how we're doing. The numbers keep going up in the polls, which is great. Let's keep going. Let's see how many responses we can get. We have well over 2,000 teachers already today. So I want to let the poll run for another 30 seconds or so. So you should be able to see the poll on your screen. Okay, so I've had over 1,000 responses. If for some reason you can't see the poll, the question is, do you like eating buffet? Yes or no? And I'll explain more in a minute. Okay, I'll give it another 10 or 15 seconds. We've got so many teachers here today, well over 2,000 of you. So I might not have time to let absolutely everybody do the poll, but I hope we can. Okay, it looks as though the responses are slowing down, so I'm going to ask Sophia to close the poll. If you didn't vote, don't worry, just think in your head, do you like buffet? Yes or no? Okay, so Sophia will close the poll. Okay, and what she's going to do is then move it to the closed section. So in your window, everybody, you should see a polls tab, and you can look at the closed, and there you can see the answers. So 92% of you said that you like eating buffet. Excellent answer. Now, an astonishing 8% of you said you don't like buffet. Now, I don't have time to go into the reasons why today, but I'm glad that most of you like eating buffet. Now, today, why have I started with this poll? Well, the answer is that although our topic is assessment, which of course is a serious topic, we can have fun with it today. Now, I have a lot of information to share with you. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to use an analogy. So we're going to use the analogy of buffet. So you can see, or you should see on your screen now, a delicious buffet arrangement. It's I'm presenting to you today from Tokyo, and it's not far from lunch, so this is making me feel a bit hungry. So my question to you, you can see the buffet on the screen, and you can also see, I think, a character on the screen here. Okay? Now, in most Western countries, we would call this buffet, and I'm afraid I don't know the Vietnamese term for it. But I live and work in Japan, and I'm coming to you today from just outside Tokyo. And in Tokyo, or in Japanese, we have an unusual word for buffet. Can you guess what it is? Look at the picture of the man to help you. Maybe in the chat window, share your guess. What do you think is the Japanese word for buffet? Okay, take a look at the picture of the man there. I've given you a quick hint just for a bit of fun this morning. We can learn a different language together. Okay, I can see many teachers in the chat saying, "Ooh, that looks tasty." Okay, well, let me give you the answer. Some of you saying warrior, not warrior. No, this is a very specific kind of warrior, right? A very specific kind of warrior. Some of you have got the answer correct. That's exactly right. Yes. Well, in Japanese, we don't call this a buffet. We actually call it a Viking, would you believe? In Japanese, we use the Western word Viking for buffet. And in Japanese, we call it Viking. Now, so just for a bit of fun, but I have a serious point here today, which is because I'm going to share a lot of information with you, we're going to use the analogy of a buffet to think about assessment in our classes. And of course, I want to make you a little bit hungry as well, hungry for assessment. So as I go through today's session, sometimes I'll show you this image and I'll ask you to think about what we've looked at and why assessment is like a buffet. But we'll do that a bit later. What I want to do now, actually, is I said earlier that I'm not going to give you lots of information about the different components, and we're not going to spend a lot of time today looking at coursebook pages. My focus is on assessment. However, if you want to know more about the Ting Ang series, you can find out more by taking our online free course overview module. And this gives you a complete overview of the course book and all the components. So you can see my colleague here, June. June has created this for you. It's available online. And in the course overview module, take a look at the little stars here. This online material gives you information about the pedagogy of the course, all the components. It gives you a unit walkthrough, and it talks to you about the digital resources that are available for you. So that online component, the course overview module, I highly recommend for getting information in your own time about the student book, the workbook, the digital tools, and so on. And you can find this on our partner's website. fungnam.edu.vn. And I'll make sure when you get the PDF that you can see that link. I'm particularly interested in the online resources because we're going to think about tests today. And really important point for today, all of the tests that I talk about today are downloadable for you and ready to go. So before you start teaching with this course, you'll need to go to this website, download the tests. It's easy to do, makes them super accessible. Don't worry, I'll show you where to get them a little bit later. But let's do another poll now, because I want to know how many of you have already seen the course overview module. How many of you have been there and done the course overview module? Don't be embarrassed if you haven't done it. Just answer the poll on your screen now. Have you seen the course overview module online? Yes? No? I don't know what that is. Just put in an honest answer, and then I want to take a quick look at the results. Every webinar we do in this series, we're promoting this resource for you because it's a great place to find out more about the course in detail, and I highly recommend it. So that poll is open for you. So I'm going to look at the polls tab. And let's just monitor for 30 seconds how many of you have seen the course overview module. So again, we have 2,000 teachers or more today, which is great. So I'm just going to let these numbers tick up and let more of you answer that poll. Have you seen or completed the course overview module? So I'll give that another 10 or 15 seconds. Okay, I can see the numbers going up, and I'll share the results with you in a moment. Okay, numbers are slowly ticking up. As I mentioned earlier, I don't have time for all 2,000 plus of you to do a vote. So I just want to get a sense of this. So I'm going to close the poll in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we've got about 1,200 responses. So Sophia, could you close the poll, please? So everybody on your polls tab, if you take a look at closed, you can see that about 60% of you have seen the course overview module. 2 thumbs up, that's great news. Thank you very much. Now, about 30% of you have not seen the course overview module. Again, I highly recommend it. It gives you lots of basic information about the course, and we've created it especially for you in Vietnam to learn more. Now, 10% of you say you don't know what the course overview module is. So just a reminder, it's a free online course. You can take it in any browser that gives you information about the course. And when you receive the follow-up email from the session, you'll find information at this link, or in the PDF, you can use this QR code with your phone to access the course overview module directly. Now, don't worry about doing that now. You'll receive the PDF and the information will be right there for you. Okay, so in that first section, I've given you some information about the course materials and where you can find out more details. But as I mentioned earlier, my focus today is not on going into all of the components. Instead, today we're going to talk about assessment. Now, in this section, I'm going to show you in detail what assessment support already exists for you with this series, how you can download it, so that, again, you're ready to get going with your classes and assessment when you start using this material. Okay, so let's take a look now at assessment in Ting An 6 Friends Plus. Now, of course, working for Oxford University Press, I've read all of the teacher's guide material for Ting An 6 Friends Plus, and there's a fantastic teacher's guide for you to get. But today, I want to share with you these 3 methods that Teeing An 6 makes assessment easy for you. The approach that we use in Teeing An 6 throughout the series, you can see on the screen. First of all, make planning and preparation easy. Secondly, be flexible and cater to all learning needs. And thirdly, to set goals and see outcomes. And I want to share with you how we do that for assessment in Teeing An 6 Friends Plus. Now, let me be honest with you. This section is not particularly interactive. I've got information to share, but it is important for everybody to focus so you come out of this knowing what support there is when you start using the course. So, how do we make planning and preparation easy? Well, all of the tests are completely downloadable, so you can download them using an internet connection to any device. And you would do that from our partner's website, Phung Nam Education. I've put the link here and it'll be in the PDF that you receive via email. So let me show you where you would get this. First of all, you go to their website, phungnameducation.vn, and there in the support materials section, you will find a list of everything that you can download to support you. Methodology resources, extra teacher resources, tests, audio. We provide you the audio as well, and I'll mention that in a minute. And finally, there is a folder called tests.rar. You can download that, it's a big file, and unpack it using something like WinZip. So you can put those files onto your computer ready anytime. And that's really convenient. We provide you those tests with our partner ready to download for you to use, so they're nice and easy to find. I hope that that will make that useful for you. Personally, I love to have downloadable resources because I can get them anywhere. So this is part of our commitment to you as Oxford University Press. We know that that convenience is important. And I'm happy to say that with our partner, we can provide you those files on their website. So the second thing is we want to be flexible and to cater to all learning needs. So how do we do that? Well, I said today that we would use different polls. Polls are an easy way for me to get information without too much chat in the chat box. So I'm going to show you a poll here. Sophia will put it on the screen, and I want you to answer this poll about assessment. So the question is, when do you assess your students? Tick all that apply to you. At the end of the year, at the end of the term, every unit, end of each lesson, or informally during the lesson. So take a look at the poll on your screen. You can tick all that apply. It's not a trick question. I'm not judging anybody. So answer the answers, tick the boxes of the ones you usually do. And again, I'll give you a little bit of time for that. Okay, I can see many answers coming in, many ticks coming into the polls now. So we're taking a look at that. Just while you do that, let me check my communications here. Check my notes. Okay, we'll keep going. I've got just about 1,000 responses now. Keep going, everybody. Okay, good. The responses are starting to slow down. We've got about 1,200 responses now. Well, suddenly everybody's responding, so that's good. I'll give it another 10 seconds or so. Okay, so just to get a representative sample, I can see a lot of results in there now. The replies, the responses are slowing down, so I'm going to ask Sophia to close the poll. Don't be offended if you didn't have time to answer. It's just to give me an indication of how you are using how you do assessment now. So if we look at the polls and the close tab, very interesting responses. We can see about 25% of you say, every unit. The interesting thing is we've got answers for every single option there. A, B, C, D, E. Many of you also testing informally during the lesson. So we've got a good spread, which is great. So every unit seems to be the biggest number of answers. At the end of the term, 23%. Okay, so at the end of the year. So in your classes, you are using a wide variety of assessment approaches, which is great. And the reason that's great is because we provide different tests for all of those different situations. So if you take a look at your screen now, you can see that I have 5 different kinds of tests that we provide for you to download free, ready to go. And now I'm going to go into a bit more detail about each of these because I know teachers have detailed questions about the kinds of tests we provide and the format. So I hope that will be useful for you. Okay, many of you in the main chat saying use all of those approaches, which is great. In my teaching experience, when I was teaching a long time ago, many of the teachers I worked with here in Japan and myself, we had a strong focus on the end of year test or the end of grade test. And everything revolved around that big score at the end of the year. Now I would move more to doing all kinds of assessment and a varied kind of assessment. And it's great that you're doing that. So the good news is we provide lots of support for you. So you can see some support, the kind of tests that we download on the screen now and how many there are. So let's look at what is in the test. So a diagnostic test is not a placement test. A diagnostic test is a very short test to give you an idea of the kind of strengths and weaknesses your class has. So at the beginning of your year working with your class, you can give them a short diagnostic test to get a sense in your class which are the weaker students, which are the stronger students within that group. You can download that, and you can see that we have A/B versions. Now, we always provide A/B versions so that you can mix the different versions in different classes so students don't contact each other with the answers. So there's diagnostic tests, okay? There's 5-minute unit tests. These are very simple, just short 5-minute tests you can do at the end of every unit to see if your students have mastered the content. So super simple, super quick. Again, these are A and B format, and they're provided for the vocabulary and language sections, which is the grammar section. Then we get on to the unit tests, and the unit tests are obviously for every unit, and they test every skill that was practiced in that unit. And there's 8 units in the book, so you can see we have 8 unit tests there. And then finally, we have end of term tests and end of year tests as well. So I hope that you think this selection will be convenient for you. These are all provided. Now, I know that you will also have questions about the format of the tests, so let me answer that for you. So one question that teachers often ask us at Oxford University Press, and in my career have often asked me, is how do we provide the test? Well, I'm happy to tell you, all of these tests are provided for you in Word format. And that's great, because that means that you can edit them, you can shorten them. If you want to reuse them year on year, you can move the questions around and the order of the questions around. So that means that we provide the tests in an editable format for you. And that's great, so that you have control over those tests and even which questions you provide. Now, some of you are saying in the chat, that's many tests. Now remember, you don't have to do them all. They are provided for your convenience. And I think Word format is the most convenient format, right? So what else do teachers ask us? I've tried to anticipate your questions here. Teachers also ask us, well, not only what is the format, but do you provide scripts? Do you provide audio? And I'm happy to say that we provide audio scripts for the tests, and we also provide audio scripts for the listening sections, and we provide test audio MP3s, which you can download from that same website, of course, completely free of charge, to use the MP3 on your device to do the listening tests. So that is also conveniently provided for you. Our focus is on your convenience. That's the second point. And the third point that I want to bring out here for you is these different levels of tests. Now, can you see that it says basic, standard, and higher? You might be asking what that means. So let me show you on the screen here. So throughout Ting An 6, we often use a 3-star system. So in the workbook, 1 star means that the workbook activity is basic level. 2 stars means it's the standard level of challenge, and 3 stars means it's a higher level of challenge. And we use that same approach in the tests that we provide for you. So you can choose between the basic version of the test, the standard version, or the higher version, depending on your student's level and the challenge that you want to give them. Now, we know that classes are mixed ability and you have different levels of student. So if you do organize your classes by their ability level, we provide 3 different versions of the test for you so that you can meet your student's level. Do you remember when you were young and you did tests? It can be very, very disheartening as a student if you take a test that is too high level. You might do the first 1 or 2 questions, then you get stuck and you feel that you can't do anything and you're a failure. But by providing different levels of challenge in the test, we can try and accommodate that. So I highly recommend that you download these tests and take a look at those, and take a look at the basic, standard, and higher level. Okay, so let me just check the information here. So these are the different kind of tests that we provide for you. So as I was saying earlier, we want to make planning and preparation easy. We want to be flexible and cater to all learning needs. And we want to set goals and see outcomes. So the final part there is to set goals and see outcomes. So I've shown you different kinds of tests which you can download, copy, edit, and give to your students. But of course, in the material, we have self-assessment as well. So on the screen now, you can see this is Unit 1. Throughout this webinar series, we've focused on Unit 1, so I want to use that example today. At the top of each unit, you have the unit topic. Here it's towns and cities. And then it tells you what you're going to do. In this lesson, it's vocabulary. But underneath that, there's a really good self-assessment opportunity. It says it's got a goal for the students. I can talk about places in a town or city. So this is a goal for the students. And as I'll mention later, this is built into the unit. So at the end of teaching the unit, we can come back to this section and we can ask students to reflect on whether they feel they have mastered the I can statement or not. So we do have self-assessment built in to the student book as well, and I'll show you specific examples later on in the next section. So as well as that self-assessment opportunity at the beginning of the unit, I'm very happy to say that we have a complete review section after every 2 units as well. So you can see on your screen here with the yellow star, I've put a red box around the review unit. So we provide review units in the book every 2 lessons, every 2 units. So if you want to, and I recommend that you do, you can check the student's progress by doing this progress section. And in the progress section, you will find specific assessment opportunities for each lesson: the vocabulary lesson, the listening lesson, the grammar lesson, the writing, and so on. So this is just one example you can see here. Here's a quick listening progress check for the students about the vocabulary and listening they've done in the previous unit. So when we think of assessment, we don't think only of tests that we give at the end of a unit or the end of a year. Assessment is built in, and you will find it there on the page as well. Again, adding to the convenience for you. So I hope that you'll find through these tests that we've provided, this makes planning and preparation easy. Our goal is to be flexible and to cater to all learning needs with different kinds and levels of test for you, and in the book to set goals and to see outcomes. Let me just take a short breath here. So let me know in the chat window, in your chat window, everybody, does that look like enough support? Is that good support for you? Does that make you feel confident about the test support? Throw your opinions in there, okay, into your chat window. I just need a quick glass of water here. Yep, many tests, that's right, and they test the 4 skills. So there are tests for reading, writing, there's listening, there's vocabulary. In the downloadable tests, there are speaking sections. There is actually a speaking test which you can download, it tests the students, it has role play, it asks the students to describe a photo, it asks the students to talk about themselves. So a wide variety of test material, all already provided for you. And again, the great thing is you can edit and change this because it's all in Word to meet your exact needs. Okay, so let me go on now, and I'm going to take a break. Oh, wow, I'm looking at this image and I'm getting pretty hungry. But here is our first opportunity to think about our analogy. So think about everything that I've just said, about all those tests that we provide. Why do you think that my buffet image is relevant here? Put your answers in the chat. What do you think? Why do you think my buffet analogy is relevant here when we think about those tests that you can download? Okay, I'll give you 10 or 15 seconds. There is a lag in the webinar, so I just need to give you time and I'll start to see some of your answers come through. Think about that buffet. I want to make this memorable for you. Why do you think buffet is relevant to what we've just looked at in the last section? Yes, exactly, T. Kim Huang. A buffet has lots of different kinds of food. And as many of you are putting here, various choices, exactly right. So that's the first point that I want you to remember today. With Ting An Friends Plus, we provide you lots of choice of different tests. You can download the test. Sadly, I can't provide you with a buffet, but I can provide you with a wide variety with a choice of tests. And I hope that you'll find those useful. Okay, good. Now, let's go on. So let's look now at this third section. And this is our biggest section now. I want to take the most time here. In this section, we're going to look at effective assessment. And in the last section, I showed you all about the ways that the course book provides assessment support for you to download at your convenience. Now, I want to look at how we can make assessment effective and provide some examples for you for doing so. So, in this section, we're going to look at what is assessment, why is assessment important, and how do we assess? And I'm going to introduce or remind you of some methodology, some approaches to assessment that we can think about and we can reflect on and we can try in our classes. But many of you said you are already doing different kinds of assessment in your classes, which is great. And in the third part, when we look at how do we assess, we're going to look at materials, and I'm going to share some teaching techniques and activities. And I can see many of you saying in the chat window that the buffet analogy is about choice, a lot of choice. Exactly. Hope to make this memorable for you. Let's see if you can remember that first one at the end. But let's now talk about assessment. So I want to focus first of all on what is assessment. And to start this off, again, I'm going to do a poll for you. So we're going to do what we call a TTT, a test, teach, test approach, test, teach, test approach. So I want to just get your confidence level first of all. So my colleague Sophia is going to put a poll on the screen for you. And this has 3 terms. So the question is, how confident are you about the differences between these 3 types of assessment? AFL, AAL, or AOL? Do you know what they are? Are you confident you know the differences between these 3 types of assessment? Rate yourself on a scale of 1, which means you're not confident at all, or 10, you are very confident you know the difference between AFL, AAL, and AOL. So I'd like you to choose an answer. Take your time reading the question if you like, and I'm going to monitor the poll window. Okay. Take your time reading this question. Take your time answering. It's important. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm not passing this information to anybody. I don't know who is giving which answer. This is just for you to reflect. Okay, I want to give you a bit of time to do this. So we've got almost 900 responses. I want to see as many responses as I can for this, everybody. So do please answer this using the poll function if you can. Okay, I'm excited to see we have well over 2,000 teachers in today's session, which is great. Thank you for joining me for this important topic. Okay, so keep going, everybody. Now, if you've already answered, in your mind, take a guess. What does AFL stand for? What does AOL stand for? What is AAL? Take a guess. You can do that in your mind. You can put it in the chat window. Doesn't matter if we make a mistake. Okay? Making mistakes is an important part of learning and assessment, so don't worry about that. I'm just going to give it another 10 seconds. The responses are slowing down now. Okay, so Sophia, would you close the poll for me, please, and move that to the closed section. So everybody, let's take a look at the closed polls. If you look at polls you can close, you can see the results there. So it looks as though we have a good number of you are quite confident about the difference between AFL, AOL, AAL. So about 18% of you gave yourself a confidence level of 8. Some of you gave yourself a confidence level of 10, extremely confident, which is great. And on the other end of the scale, some of you, about 12%, said you're not confident at all about the differences. Don't worry, we're going to explore those in detail. Now that needs some explanation for me, so bear with me, but by the end of this session, I want to see that you are more confident about these things. So that's my goal for the next part of this session. So on your slide now, you can see we're looking at assessment. So in assessment, I've used an Oxford Learners Dictionary here to give you a definition of assessment. It says the process of testing students and making a judgment about their knowledge, ability, or progress. And I want you to think carefully about this because there are 2 parts to this definition. The first part is the process of testing students. The second part is making a judgment about their knowledge, ability, or progress. Now, if we're going to look at assessment in detail, we do need to understand a definition of what it is. That's very simple. But if we want to know more about assessment, we could go even deeper, and that's what I'm going to do with you now. So on your screen, you can see another definition of assessment, and this comes from our position paper. You can see a picture there. We publish a series of free research papers for teachers, made together with experts in assessment. This one is called Effective Feedback, the Key to Successful Assessment for Learning. And there's a QR code for you there. Remember, that QR code will be in the PDF later you receive, so you don't have to use it now. But you can see another assessment there, another assessment definition. Assessment, gathering information in order to make judgments that provide the basis for action. And it's this second part I really want to focus on today. As teachers, we do a lot of assessment. Of course, it's part of what we do, but we need to use the assessment to give us information to take action. So after an assessment, what do we do with those results? What do we tell the students? What guidance do we give them? How do we change our teaching or the content of our lesson? So this is a really important point. Assessment is about providing information for us to take actions and to make decisions. So that's going to be a really important point. The second point that I want to make today is about what's the difference between testing and assessment. Okay, you can see on your screen here, this is a quote from Professor Jack Richards, who is a very prominent educator and author in the EFL/ESL field. And he answers this question on his blog, testing or assessment? Let's take a look at it now. Okay, a test is one form of assessment. Read through this quote and then type F in the chat window when you've finished reading. I won't read the whole thing out. It's much more efficient for you to read it and let me know. But I want you to think about the difference between a test and assessment. A test is just one form of assessment, right? So I'll give you a little bit of time to read through that. Okay, some of you have finished reading. Okay, now I hope you agree with this. A test is just one form of assessment. As teachers, you know many different kinds of tests. Multiple choice, gap fill, closed tests. But we can also do interviews, observations, questionnaires, teacher review. All of these are different forms of assessment. And in my experience as a younger teacher, I was very focused on tests, end of term tests, for example, but there are many different ways to assess. So I did just want to think about that difference between testing or assessment because it's important to understand that definition. And sometimes when we're reading about assessment, both of these terms are used. But today we're talking about assessment and the different kinds of tests which can use or be used as assessment. Okay, so let's go on. Now, I'm going to give you that information. The first one we're going to look at is AOL. And AOL stands for Assessment of Learning. And you can see it on the screen there. Why do we use AOL? AOL is summative assessment to establish what the learner has achieved at the end of a course. And in red, who uses this information? The teacher does, and the student. There's probably a grade. It might be a percentage grade. It might be a letter grade like A through F. Usually this is a big, more formal test that might contribute to the student's overall grade, but it comes at the end of the learning process. So this is AOL, assessment of learning. In the chat window, can you give me an example of a summative test? What kind of tests might be summative? When would we use them? Let me know in the chat window, everybody. Okay. The key thing here, I think, is that summative comes at the end of a course. And a good example is going to be something like an end of year final exam. I can see many of you writing their final exams exactly. So that's AOL. Let's take a look at the next one, which is AFL, or assessment for learning. So this is formative assessment. It helps us form opinions. So we use this to monitor learning, identify strengths and weaknesses, and target areas that need work. So we use a formative assessment to target areas that need work. So we do these things for the teacher. So the information we get through short quizzes, informal questions with students, observing the students in the lesson. We do this to get a sense of their strengths and weaknesses, and that helps us decide, do I stay with my lesson plan? Do I need to teach this point a little bit more? Or do the students understand everything and we can go on? So this formative assessment gives us information which we can use to make decisions. Even if you make a decision, which is all of my students understand this content and I can see that, you're taking action based on information. But when does formative happen? During the lesson, during the term, on a day-to-day basis, right? And it's usually informal. There probably isn't a formal grade. Or if you have a grade, maybe you don't write it down, okay? So it's informal, it's usually short, and it's used mainly for the teacher. So we've got AOL and AFL. And I can see many of you writing about these in the chat, which is great. Share your ideas, please. But I mentioned one more kind. Now, before we go on to that, let me just confirm for you some different kinds of formative and summative assessment. Okay. So you can see here on the screen, we've got formative assessment on the left-hand side during the course, summative assessment on the right-hand side at the end of the course. And then I've put different kinds underneath. So formative assessment or informal might be quizzes or unit tests. Usually the grade isn't recorded. And summative might be more formal. Usually happens at the end of the year. The results are shared with the students, shared with could be with the school. The results are given to the parents, for example, and the grade is recorded. Exactly. So I can see Chung, teacher, is writing AFL for during the course. Exactly right. Perfect. Now, there is overlap between these things, right? So there are not strict rules about which is formative and which is summative. There is overlap, but generally you can see the differences here. Now, I mentioned one more kind. And this is the kind that teachers are usually less familiar with. So we're going to look at now the final type I want to talk about today, which is not AOL, not AFL, but there was one more, and that is, I'm going to put it on the screen for you, AAL. And what is this? You can see in the yellow box. AAL is assessment as learning. Excellent. And Nyuk teacher says assessment as learning. Excellent. Some of you are already putting in. This is great. This is great. Now, I'm sharing this with you. This was kind of new for me, and I hope that it would be useful for you too. In AAL, learners use formal and informal feedback and self-assessment to help understand the next steps of the learning. So, students assess themselves to understand strengths and weaknesses, and then ideally to decide what their next steps are. Okay. Now, I want to be very clear. I know that your students are 11 or 12 years old, so this will be new for many of them, and they might not be ready of course, to choose what they do next themselves. You might not give them that choice. But AAL, self-assessment, is an important part of being an effective learner, and helping the students do this is part of being an effective teacher. Even if we don't get students to choose what they do next, we can encourage students to believe that self-assessment is an important part of their growth. And as they get older and they leave you and they become older teenagers, university students, and even go into the world of work, being able to assess your own output, your work, is very important. And this is where students assess themselves. Now, again, your students are still young. So really, we're going to focus on encouraging them to assess themselves, opening the door to this skill. Okay, it's really important to be realistic about this. So to summarize this section, before we start to look at something else, you can see on the screen here, why are these three things important? Well, the reason is that which one should we do? Well, obviously, I think that we should do all of them. In general, if I think about my own teaching, there was an imbalance, just thinking about myself. Okay? I used to do more assessment of learning, the end of grade test. Okay? But if I think back to my own teaching experience, I think I could have done more assessment as learning, self-assessment with the students, encouraging them to self-assess. I also could have done more assessment for learning, observing them informally, quick quizzes, fun quizzes, raising of hands, all of these different things. So today, I do want us to think about what is that balance of these three different methods. And I hope that you'll be able to go away and reflect on your situation. Yes, many of you in the chat window saying all of them are important, and I completely agree with you. So again, I've been talking for a long time. Many of you know that I love to talk. This is a big topic. So let's take a quick brain break now. Over to you. Let's think about that buffet. And I want you to think, we've just looked at AFL, AOL, AAL. How does that relate to the buffet image on your screen? What do you think? Pop it into the chat window. Take a moment to think. Now, some teachers saying that you think assessment as learning is the most important. That's interesting. I think it might be important to focus on that, perhaps because we don't do it so much. But I think, if possible, a balance is important. So think about the buffet, everybody. Let me know in the chat window, how does that section relate to the buffet? Let me see your ideas, and I'll use this just to take a quick sip of water. Let me just see. Take a look at that image there, the buffet image. So I'm starting to see some answers. So a teacher just said, you can choose when and where to eat. That is the benefit of a buffet. Yes, you can choose what to eat. Voti teacher says, integrate everything to make it delicious. Yep, I like that answer. Very good, everybody. So, in my opinion, the important thing here is a combination of approaches. A combination of approaches. So you can see here that you have many different dishes on the screen. Some of them might represent AOL. Some of them might represent AFL. Some of them might be AAL. But the key thing is we use a combination of approaches. And so our wide knowledge of assessment gives us many different options you could put together. But you take them at the right time. When you want to eat dessert, you take a little bit of dessert, for example. So a combination of assessment approaches is really important. For a healthy meal, we need vegetables and we need meat, carbohydrates, exactly. Oh, and as Loan teacher says, we could just take a small amount of each of them. Exactly. There's many different ways you could think of this image. But I thought of this combination of approaches as being important for a balanced assessment diet. Okay, everybody. So hopefully you'll remember choice of tests and combination of approaches. Now let's go on. I'm quickly going to talk about why is assessment important, and then we're going to look at some specific ideas. So we might say, why is assessment important? Well, that's obvious. You can see the reasons on the screen here. It's expected, right? But it's also important because every situation is unique. You know your classes, and all of your classes will be different. And that's part of the joy of teaching, is students' different abilities and their different characters. But assessment can also boost motivation and show the students what they know, which can motivate them to try harder or to keep going. And the final bullet point there, as you can see, it helps teachers and learners to make informed decisions about what to study and what to do. Now, I do want to talk about formative assessment specifically. And some of you maybe have heard this before. But why is formative assessment important? Well, the image on your screen here, it's like tasting the soup. And you can see an image of two chefs here. What is that chef doing? Well, he's tasting the soup. And there's a lovely quote from a prominent researcher, Robert Stake, who is a US-based researcher, and he is particularly famous for his work at the University of Illinois. And he says this: when a cook tastes the soup, that's formative. When the guests taste the soup, that's summative. So what does this mean? You as the teacher, you are the chef. When do you taste the soup? While you are cooking the food, right? So as we are cooking, as we are teaching, we taste the soup. If something is not quite right, what does a chef do? Adds more pepper, adds more salt, adds more ingredients. And this is exactly what we have to do. Like a good chef, as we are teaching, we are doing formative assessment, testing the soup, and based on that information, changing or maybe not changing what we're doing in the class. And then at the end of the year, when the guests taste the soup, the guests are the students, that's summative. At the end of the year, the food is served. Wonderful quote by Robert Stake, and I wanted to share it with you there today, because this idea of formative versus summative can be a little bit confusing. So our theme today, I guess, is tied to food, but I hope you like that to help you remember. That's how I help you to remember, or I help myself remember. Now, I do also, before we go on to different activities, I want to underline this really important point that I made earlier. It's not the quiz that counts, but the that happens and Okay, you might be laughing at my strange noises. What are the missing words here? So Tal teacher says, yes, formative assessment help teachers understand what's happening while you're teaching. Exactly. So what are the missing words here? Can you take a guess in the chat window? I'm not going to do a poll here. It's going to take too long, and I want to spend the last 15, 20 minutes showing you activities we can try. So the answer here is, here we go. It's not the quiz that counts, but the thinking that happens before and after. It's not the quiz that counts, but the thinking that happens before and after the assessment. Do you agree? This comes back to what I said about action. Assessment not only tells us what the students know, but formative assessment, summative assessment, assessment as learning together, they help us make decisions about what we need to do in the classroom. Sometimes that's easy. Okay, the students have mastered everything. Sometimes it poses difficult questions. For example, if I use a quick quiz and I can see the students haven't mastered a grammar point, now I can make a decision. At the beginning of next lesson, do I change my warm-up activity to a quick grammar review to help the students master that grammar before we go on? But as you can see, I'm using the assessment to help me make a decision. So as we look at the activities, please bear this in mind. I'm going to show you different assessment ideas, but it's what we do with the information that is important. I would argue that we shouldn't waste time doing assessment if we don't use it to think about what action we should take, because we're very busy. You are very busy in the classroom. Okay, so the final thing I'm going to look at today is we're going to look at how do we assess, and I'm going to give you some ideas, and we'll go through these. These are very simple, but I'm going to encourage you to think about your own students and how you can adapt them. So how do we assess? Well, there's formal assessment, there's teacher observation, and there's self-assessment. I'm going to look at some of those now. Now, we have many experienced teachers here today, so I'm going to go quite quickly just to share some ideas with you. And I have also considered for you online assessment. How could you do these online as well? So before we get into the activities, just to share with you, we have some free online support for you, which we call a professional development module. When you receive the follow-up PDF, that will have a link, as you can see here, and a QR code for a short online interactive overview of how you can assess remotely. So if you're doing online classes or you have to do them in the future, I recommend that. Okay, the other thing I want to say is we have lots of, again, complementary resources for you that go into more detail. Working with experts at the University of Oxford, we provide ideas on how you can assess learning online. We have the focus paper you can see on the right. These are short, practical, and full of ideas. On the left, we have these longer position papers, which give you lots of research-based ideas and background on assessment for learning. So please take a look at those later. All right, so let's take a look now at different kinds of assessment. I've mentioned formal and summative assessment, so I'm not going to spend long on these, but here's a quick quiz for you. Can you remember the 5 different types of tests that we provide for you to download? Pop those into the chat window for me, everybody. Let me see if your memories are working. I know you're all focused on the buffet. See if you can remember the different kinds of tests that we provide with Fung-Nam Education for you to download. Pop them in the chat, quick memory test for you. We have many different kinds of tests for you to download. Okay, can you remember what they are? Let's see, I want to see an answer. Diagnostic, exactly. What are some of the others? Use your memories, everybody. I'm testing you now. I'm testing your knowledge recall. Knowledge recall. Okay, yeah, exactly right. 5-minute test, diagnostic test. Now, in those tests, these ones are the summative tests, the unit tests, the end of term tests, end of year tests. So we already provide summative tests for you. They're ready to go. So you can just download those. What I want to talk about more today is informal, okay, formative assessment, and to share some ideas with you. Very quickly, let's look at those. So, I love quotes. I've put a lot of them on the screen for you. Here's another one for you today. This is in our research paper. Can you guess the missing word? A great teacher is a habitual of his or her students. A great teacher is a habitual of his or her students. Well, the answer is a great teacher is a habitual student of his or her students. So to be the very best teacher, you need to be a student of your students. You need to know not only what they like and they dislike, but also what or how well they are doing. So we study our students to give us information. And one way we can do that formatively is to simply observe our students and constantly ask ourselves, what are students doing well? What do they need to work on? So you can see I've got these big binoculars here. Don't use binoculars in the classroom. It will be a bit strange. But as we're teaching, as the students are doing activities, what are they doing well? What do they need to work on? It's a state of mind, right? It's teacher mind. So we're constantly asking ourselves this question. But you have big classes. How can we do this? We can't remember all of these different students individually. Well, a very traditional method is simply using an assessment checklist. And you can see an example on the screen here. Now you might say, well, this is very old-fashioned, but as you're walking around the class and students are doing the activity, you're observing them. You can't remember everything. So at the beginning of the year, with different teachers, put together a simple assessment checklist of the skills in the textbook or the skills that you want to focus on. And then what you can do is, when the students are doing an activity, you put the students' names across the top at the beginning of the year. You can see, you can check if they've mastered something or they haven't. So you're doing observation and you're keeping a list of what the students are doing. Now, you're doing this as you're walking around already, and most good teachers already walk around and observe their students. So a simple way to do this is to have a simple 3-letter keyword system. So here you can see, when I'm walking around and I'm observing students, I don't have time to write long notes. Instead, I just want a simple key, C, N, or W, competent, not competent, or working on. And you can simply put that next to the skill underneath the student's name. And as a group of teachers, if you do this, you build up more rich information about what the students know and don't know. So use checklists. Another simple idea is drawing. Now, your students are young teenagers, so they still enjoy drawing, right? Older teenagers, 18, 19, they may not enjoy it so much, but it's a very valuable form of formative assessment. Ask your students, give them a piece of paper and ask them to draw something. For example, showing prepositions of place. Ask them to draw different vocabulary items. This is a simple way of seeing at a glance what students know. And as you're walking around, teachers, you have a very good sense. Is the student struggling with this? Or do they really understand the meaning and they're able to draw it? So drawing is one other way. It's a fun method of formative assessment. Okay, now here's slightly something a little bit different. I know many teachers have told us you work in big classes. So here's a fun way to do assessment in big classes, and this is called an ABCD card. Okay. Have you ever used ABCD cards? It's very simple. I like to get the students, one way that I could make this interactive is get students to do this. But what you can see is I have a card here. Can you see that? And you can see that I have the letters A, B, C, and D. Here is A at the top, oops, B, C, and D. Okay? And each student makes with these, and I have them on a piece of paper. I just fold it over like this. This is A4. And I give the students a question. I put a question, you can put a question on the board. Okay, and the students have to answer the question. So here's a grammar quiz for you teachers. The boy gave back his ball. Is the correct answer A? Is the correct answer A, B, C, or D? What do you think? Give me the correct answer in the chat window as quick as you can. The boy gave, what is the correct answer? So which letter would I hold upright? So the correct answer, the student has to put at the top. That's right. The boy gave him back his ball. So the correct answer, the student puts at the top. Now this is great for shy students, right? Shy students don't want to raise their hand and give the answer. So what the student can do is they can put it in front of their chest like this. The other students can't see their answer because it's in front of their chest. They're all facing the whiteboard, but I can immediately see which students are not sure or which students have got the wrong answer. And this is called an ABCD card. It's a great, simple way, very tactile, of getting students to do a formative quiz. And as teachers, you're very good at spotting patterns. So even if you have 35, 40 students, this is a quick way of seeing what students can do, right? And all you need is a piece of paper, some markers. Now, for those of you who are more digital, There is a digital version of this. It's called Plickers. This is an app which is not made in conjunction with Oxford University Press. So please use this if you want to try it, respecting your local privacy laws and the student's privacy. But there's a simple app you can download. It's called Plickers. It goes on your phone. And what you do is you print out an ABCD card for each student. Okay, each card in the set is different. You print them out. You give each one to a student, okay? And then students, you can't see it, but there's a little A, a little B, a little C, a little D. Students use this card in the class. And then what you do is you use your phone, the app on your phone, and you scan the class. You scan the class, and on your screen on your phone, you can see how many students are correct, how many students are wrong. And if you're willing to set up the system with their student name or student number, you can see statistics as well. Now that information is not shared with somebody else, it just lives on your phone. So if you do want to use technology, or if you're teaching online, you can use Plickers to hold these up to the screen. So let me just quickly look through and see where else I want to focus in the remaining time that we have. So here you can see an example of students using Plickers in the class. The final part that I want to look at today is self-assessment, right? Now, self-assessment, or AAL, we talked about, is many students are not familiar with self-assessment, so we need to encourage it. And at first it might seem strange. But on your screens are some simple ways to use self-assessment for the students to think about what they know. The first thing you could do is a traffic light system. Your students are still quite young, right? So they're probably more willing to do this. You might use a system using colored lollipops. You can buy these in shops. Don't have to eat a lot of ice cream. You can just buy these in hobby shops, for example, red, yellow, green. Or you can simply create and print out little squares, which you can color in with the students. But in this idea, the students, they self-assess by showing you, do they think they've mastered something? Do they think they kind of understand it, which might be yellow, or maybe they're not confident about it, which is red? And what they can do is they can put that at the top of their desk, so as you walk around, you can see what they've said. They don't have to show everybody. Now, you might think this is a bit childish, but helping students to self-assess easily is really important. If you think that these kinds of tools are a little bit childish or too much trouble, the other easy way to do this is in the students' textbooks, after an activity, get them to draw a little square and color it green or yellow or red in their Ting An 6 workbook or in their student book. Okay? They don't have to show anybody. Remember, we're not testing them. We just want them to begin this process of self-assessment. It's not easy. Students may not be familiar with it and they may not understand why to do it, which is why communication from the teacher about the importance of self-assessment is really key. Now, in different cultures, you might not want to use color. For example, in Japan, a circle means correct or confident or good. A triangle means not so good or not sure. And a cross means not confident or wrong. Okay? So students can self-assess their work and draw those into their textbooks. Very simply, low prep, no prep. And that's what we want with formative assessment or self-assessment, right? Don't want to spend a lot of time prepping. Now, I've got an eye on the time. I've got 10 minutes and I want to spend time for questions. So what I'm going to do is just quickly mention, everybody, the way that we have integrated self-assessment into the book for you. Okay, the way we've done this is in the textbook, we've used smiley faces. These emoticons are international, right? So a smiley face is a good way of self-assessing. Students can put these in their books, or if you're teaching online, the student can message you using the text box to tell you how they feel about this activity. But if you're using a print textbook, they can draw this in their books at the end of the lesson or after doing an activity. And I'm happy to say that, not sure what's happening with my screen there. In the progress review, remember at the end of every 2 units, we have a progress review, and you can see on the screen here that in the textbook, we have integrated this smiley face approach. Students can circle how they feel about the activity and their confidence. So you don't even have to prepare that if you don't want to. It's built into the progress review in the book for you. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to see if I can get to one final page for you here, and then I will try and answer some questions. So what I want you to do now is I want you to think about what I told you, the importance of what happens after the quiz. Okay? So I've shown you all these different methods which we can use, but I want you again to remember it's what we do with this information that is important, right? So that's your responsibility to make an informed decision after using some of these methods to understand your students' knowledge level. So let's go to my buffet again. And it's just coming up to 12:25 in Japan. It's lunchtime. We'll finish in a few minutes. What do you think is the final thing I want you to remember from my buffet analogy today? What do you think it might be? Think about all of those different methods which we just used. Did you know all of those different teaching approaches? Was any of them new to you? Okay. Well, what I want you to think about here is not only that I love buffet. That's not the only thing I want you to remember. What I want you to think about is, like a buffet, assessment is a chance to try new things. We provide you with lots of support in Tian An 6, and many of you are already assessing in different ways, but try new things. If you haven't tried them already, try colored squares, try smiley faces, try ABCD cards to find the right way of informal assessment for you, to give you this complete picture that will help you make informed decisions. So to finish off this section, I will answer a few questions. Here is a final poll for you. We've covered all of this information today. I'm going to ask Sophia to put a final poll on the screen for you now, poll number 5. I want to see how confident you are about AOL, AFL, and AAL. So rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, I tested you at the beginning of this section. I've taught you information about these things, and now I want to see how confident you are. How confident are you about the differences between AFL, AAL, and AOL? Please let me know by submitting the poll. Okay, teachers starting to answer the poll now, which is great. I'm getting a lot of more confident answers. So while teachers answer the poll, while you continue to answer the poll, I'm just going to summarize what I've talked about today. So please remember, everybody, that Tian An 6 Friends Plus has lots of support for assessment that's ready for you to download from our partner's website. It's formatted in Word format. It's convenient. It can be changed. We have both formative and summative forms of assessment, and we have opportunities to gauge the student from inside the book as well. So I feel that everything that you need is ready. Secondly, let's combine assessment methods, because this provides you with richer information, and that will allow you to make decisions about what to teach and how to adjust your course in your lessons if you need to do so. So I've summarized there, I think, the 3 main points of today. And if you don't remember anything else, I hope you've enjoyed my buffet analogy and that this will help you remember some key points about assessment today. A choice of assessment with Tian An 6 is provided for you. There's a combination of approaches which we must use: AFL, AAL, ASL. And finally, this is a chance for us to try new things so that we can understand not only what our students know, but what they need to know and what we need to teach them going forward. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening. I'm now going to go to the Q&A. We have about 5 minutes left for Q&A. So I'm going to go to the Publish tab. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions here. So the first question is from Voti Nook Sensei. Sorry, I speak Japanese. Voti Nook teacher. And the teacher says, should testing and assessment be differentiated in a multi-level class? I believe, or the teacher says, I believe it's beneficial to avoid demotivating low-level students, but there's still a lot of concerns in terms of equality. That's a great question. So you're referring here to the fact that we provide you with different levels of tests, the basic level test, the standard level test, and the high level test. I think that differentiating what we do in our classrooms is important. Because it does avoid demotivating students. Remember, if a student does a test that is much too difficult for them, after the first couple of questions, they'll fail and they'll be demotivated where they can't answer anything else. So I would recommend differentiating tests in the same class if you can. The other reason I say that is because it's important when we do differentiation to explain to students why we are doing it. I don't say, this student is getting an easier test. I say this student is getting a test that's right for their level and will give us useful information. I'm giving you that test because it's right for your level and it will provide the right level of challenge. So communication about what is being tested and why is really, really important. So if you're in a situation where you can differentiate in a multi-class test, please do so. I encourage you to download and look at those different level tests that we provide and see which ones you think are appropriate. I'm a big fan of differentiation because mixed classes are a reality in every classroom in the world. And the more we can take that into account, the more motivated our students will feel. So I hope that I've answered that question for you. Now I have another question here, which will put us right on time. So Tran teacher or Tran V teacher asks, what could I do to help students feel less anxious before doing tests? That's a great question. Tests and assessment are a form of, they make students very anxious, and that can affect their performance in tests. The key here is communication. At the beginning of the year or on a regular basis, let's communicate with our students why we do assessment, what the benefits of assessment are, and how those will help you as the teacher. It's a tool for you, but how they will help the students to improve their English going forward. As teachers, you know the best way to communicate with your students. I really think that the communication is key to help students understand that, yes, tests are important, but understanding why we're doing them so that students are well informed and understanding how assessment can help them can help to reduce that anxiety that students feel about tests, at least to some degree. I hope that answers your question, Tran V teacher. Thank you very much again for asking it of me today. So that's everything that I have time for today. I hope that this session has been useful to you and that you've got some new ideas. I've gone quite quickly, so I apologize if I went too quickly in some stages, but we've covered a lot of ground. And let me just say, on behalf of everybody at Oxford University Press and our partners at Fungnam Education, it's been a real pleasure and a delight for me to work with you today. And thank you very, very much for your time and attendance. And I wish you every success with your classes going forward and your use of Ting and 6 Friends Plus. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Have a wonderful weekend. And I look forward to seeing you in the future. Bye.